Hey, what's up, everybody? I kind of want to share a story of what happened to me a few nights ago where I had a complete severe anxiety attack that ended up leading me to having to go to the hospital. And I'm not normally an anxious type of person. Like, in fact, I've always been considered a very low-key, very chillax type of person because I'm from California, right? Apparently, people from LA are very calm and very relaxing. Over the last couple of days, though, I've just been feeling very, if you want to call it, very stressed, just very not myself. And I honestly want to blame it on COVID, right? We're all dealing with this COVID pandemic that's not only affecting us physically, but it's also affecting us mentally in terms of keeping our sanity. Because one of the things that is hard for a lot of people, I don't want to say hard for people to understand, is that not only are we dealing with the physical aspects of it, but it's also the emotional parts where we're not being able to really hang out with people. We're socially isolating ourselves, and for people who don't really have a lot of friends and family in the immediate area, it can be really hard to go through this pandemic essentially alone. And unfortunately, I do have a few good friends I still do see from time to time, but it's not concurrent enough where I can see them pretty much like every day. Let's say if you're married, you have kids, and you have a family. Anyways, the idea particularly got worse on Friday night where I just kind of had a pinnacle moment where I felt like I don't know what to do anymore in my life, where I felt like I had nothing to look forward to. Every day was the same routine thing, day in, day out. It's like we all go to work, we all come home, and just rinse and repeat. And then, can you believe it's already been 6 months, 5 or 6 months since coronavirus has hit the fan, and we're still dealing with this to this day, and I feel like nothing is going to change, and that's one of the problems. Anyways, I was just talking to my friend about all of the things that I was just experiencing of like, what's the point of life if you technically have nothing to look forward to anymore? I'm not trying to sound like very dire, very, very grim, if anything, but this is just what I was feeling yesterday. And then afterwards, I decided, you know what? Let me maybe going to a pot shop might help. Let me just go pick up some edibles so that way I can just go home, relax, and just chill, right? So I ingest about 20 milligrams of THC at about, give or take, 9 o'clock, 9:30ish. And I was starting to watch this Rick and Morty while I was eating Mod's Pizza for dinner. At some point, I started feeling like I couldn't breathe. I started having like this little anxiety, right? So I called my friend Andrea to just help calm me down. Like, hey, can you just please talk to me? Just tell me that I'm gonna be okay. And as I was laying in bed, she was just telling me I was okay, and it was nice. Like, it went away, right? Safe to say, the anxiety part went away. Went back to finish another episode of Rick and Morty, and at some point, I just started feeling like, okay, the minute I sit up, the minute I am not in a relaxed position, I start to panic. And so I just turned everything off, went to bed, and I started watching basketball highlights, which was actually really, really enjoyable. And at some point, for one reason or another, I started panicking. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I just started freaking out. What ended up happening to my bodily sensation was that my hands felt very numb, and I felt that whole tingling sensation go down to my whole body. I felt like someone was just sitting on my chest and I could not breathe. And so I started thinking to myself, like, holy shit, am I having a heart attack? What do I do? The first thing I tried to do this time was I tried to call Andrea, and by then it was 12 o'clock. No response. Tried calling her again. No response. So I said, okay, let me try calling my other friends who I know may stay up late at night. And I called this other person who I know sleeps like at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. She didn't pick up either. And I'm calling her like 2 or 3 times, like right back to back. Maybe she's just in the bathroom, but she didn't call me back. And all of a sudden, I started freaking out, like, who am I gonna call? Like, I don't know who to reach out to. I'm here by myself, pretty much in the state of Washington. I don't really have any immediate friends. I'm living by myself. It's 12 o'clock at night on a Friday. Who can I reach out to? Because I just started freaking out with the fact that I'm gonna be alone and I'm dealing with this whole anxiety situation. I ended up calling my good friend who works at Overlake Hospital. Didn't pick up the phone, obviously, and I get it. It's late, people are sleeping, and this is one of the more, I guess, important things I would just want to re-emphasize to other people is that if you guys have close friends and close families nearby, you guys should definitely set an alert on your phone so that only certain people's numbers or whatever can go through. Because let's say there is an emergency situation where they have to get in contact with you at like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll hear the phone ring, and obviously they're not calling to say hi. There's some real shit going on that they need you right there, right now. I called my sister because I figured my sister would be up. Didn't pick up either. Called my mom. My mom surprisingly picked up, and that was almost the last resort because I know that I don't want to call my mom because I don't want to worry my mom, right? Like for those of us who have kids, when your child comes to you with a serious problem such as you feel like you're gonna die, you feel like you're having anxiety to the point where you feel like you're gonna die, and that's obviously a very, very scary conversation for just people and loved ones to have. Especially when knowing that my mom cannot physically do anything to help me because she's like literally California, Washington. That's at least a 2-hour flight, and by then who knows what could happen, right? 4-hour flight. So anyways, it was comforting to talk to my mom, but at the same time it wasn't either because I knew that she was not there. She was not here locally. So I called the last and only person that I could think of that may pick up her phone. And I don't know why I did this, but I called my boss. And first off, I called her work phone. I'm like, I don't think she's gonna pick up her work phone. And I called her home phone and she didn't pick up the first time, but she did text me saying, hey, is everything okay? Call me back if it's important. And so I did call her back and I just started explaining to her just some of the feelings that I was experiencing. Like I'm like, boss, I'm sorry to call you so late. I just didn't know who else to turn to, because I was having literally a nervous breakdown of a severe anxiety attack. I couldn't really feel my fingers anymore. My body was in almost in a tetany situation where basically all of my fingers were locking up and I just could not feel anything. I was feeling very lightheaded. I just could not focus. All I could think about was just like, I think I'm gonna die. I mean, obviously when you're having an anxiety attack, you're not thinking straight. And at some point, she's just like, do you want me to call 911 for you? Do you want me to call 911 for you? I'm like, no, please don't call 911. I think I'll be okay. Because the reason why I don't want her to call 911 is because I know how expensive, and this is where my second segue for this topic for my video for today is just like the American healthcare system is such a shit show of just health, right? So she just said, should I call 911? Should I call 911? I'm like, fine, just call 911 for me, please. I don't know what to do. I've never experienced this before in my life where I told my mom, like, Mom, I feel like I'm gonna die. My heart's just gonna give out. I'm just gonna, like, everything was just blurry. I had blurred vision. I felt like I was having a combination of a stroke, a heart attack, and all of those things that, 60-year-old people end up getting. So 911 people show up and they're just trying to talk to me, trying to calm me down. And they had brought the stretcher. I'm in the hallway walking around, freaking out. And prior to this, I was knocking on my neighbor's doors just to try and get some help. Like, guys, help me. I wasn't really saying help me in the hallway, but I was just like in my head, like, please just open the door. I need to just have someone help me. No one answered the door. I mean, it's hard to say, right? 12 o'clock, 12:30 in the morning, and someone's frantically knocking on your door. Are you gonna answer the door? No. I mean, at least that's what, sad to say, no, but I was desperate. I just didn't know who to really talk to. So anyways, paramedics showed up and they started talking to me like, hey, are you okay? Are you the one that called 911? I'm like, yeah. And I just told them like, hey, I'm freaking out here. I don't know what to do. I just need someone to really talk to. I need someone to just help me get through this, right? And they're like, okay, sure, buddy. Take my vital signs, heart rate. Heart rate was about 120 resting heart rate, which that's high for a resting heart rate. My blood pressure was about 139 over like 85. Oxygen saturation levels were about 95, 96. So I was a little hyperventilating a little bit. My respiratory rate, they counted, was about 21, 22, which was considered rapid. And at some point I was like, they asked me, do I want to go to the hospital? I'm like, no, because the first thing automatically that came up to my mind was I cannot pay this, right? We've all seen stories of people who end up going bankrupt or just having to pay exorbitant medical bills because of I'm just call it some stupid reason. That in my case, because I had an anxiety attack that I just did not want to pay for. And I was like, buddy, like please tell me, how much does it cost if I were to get on the stretcher and go to the hospital? His answer, I mean, I guess this is a typical medical answer, is that, I don't know, let's see what your insurance is. And obviously I didn't want to think about that, but I'm like, I don't know what to do. Should I pay for this? Should I just go try and just live it out and see if it's going to be okay? But obviously when you're in such a freaked out moment that you're not really going to know what to do. I was really, really thirsty at this point. I was really, really parched. So I went back to my room and I asked them like, hey, do you guys mind if you just follow me into my room? That way, you know, I could be okay. And I just kind of wanted that support as well. Got some water from the fountain, started drinking. My symptoms, my physical symptoms started getting worse. My hands started getting really, really numb to the point where they felt really heavy. My blurred vision got even worse, and my headache, I just felt like I was gonna pass out any moment. So I just said, you know what, fuck it. Let's just go, take me, I don't care. And like, you sure? I'm like, yeah, just take me. And then, so they took me, got me to the hospital. Not to the hospital, so let's backtrack a little bit. They took me, we went down to the ambulance, sat me up in the back room, and I remember initially it was a guy sitting next to me, just I guess getting my information down. And it felt like maybe a minute, 2 minutes had passed, and I was wearing my watch at the time. I'm like, you know, why haven't we left yet? Why haven't we left yet? And he was like, oh, the person's just getting the keys ready to start the car. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. A couple of minutes again passed by, and I'm like, why haven't we left yet? What's going on? And same answer. She's just trying to get the car ready. And I'm like, to me, this sounded a little bullshit, because if it was an immediate emergency, how have you not started your car already? And I realized, I think what they were doing is that they were trying to process my information and trying to get my credit card, my health insurance, and my ID, just trying to formulate some type of, I guess, payment plan for me. That's what I'm assuming, right? Anyways, by this time, I was severely thirsty, and I was asking him like, hey, can I get some water, please? I'm really, really thirsty. Like, my lips were really dry. My tongue was just it just felt very sticky. You know, I was talking like this, like, hey, buddy, I'm really thirsty. That's what it sounded like. That's what it felt like. The guy's like, sorry, we don't have any water in the ambulance. Okay. Can you get some water? Anyways, he's just like, you know, we'll get you some water once we take you to the hospital. And what felt like 10 minutes of just sitting in the ambulance, we finally left, we got there. They put me in a room. A couple of people came by. Okay. And actually, before I say this, let me just say that when my boss had called 911 for me, she also told me that she was going to come by and just make sure that I was okay. And I live in Bellevue. My boss lives in the Tacoma, somewhere around there. And the equivalent of Tacoma to Bellevue is about 50 to 60 miles, give or take, something along that line. At 12:30 in the morning, or whenever it is that I called her, it's like she was willing to drive out for me, for just her work to be that just, you know, we don't hang out, we don't talk very often other than like work related matters, but it's like she did that for me, and that really, really made me feel good. Anyways, so back in the emergency room, I'm basically, I'm on the stretcher, and they want to transfer me to the hospital bed. And I remember one moment, they're like, hey, can you try and get yourself to the hospital bed? I'm like, and they're like, hey, we're gonna get you to the hospital bed. I'm like, no. Let me try and do this on my own. And for one reason or another, I started thinking about my patients. I wanted to actually experience that feeling of like, I can't move my arm, I can't move my body, but I want to try and see if I can move myself from the stretcher to the hospital bed on my own accord without anybody helping me. Because that way, as I don't want to say stupid as this is going to sound, but I wanted to experience what it's like not being able to move your arm. I want to be able to experience what it's like not being able to just sit up, stand up, roll over to try and get into a better position, because as physical therapists, all the time we're trying to teach people how to do that, right? Lift your arm up over your head, you know, try and touch your nose, or in this case, for me, lower extremity, you know, can you try and work on improving your postural control so you could sit up straighter? I was trying to do that, and I even told them, like, I need to experience this on my own so that I could see what my patients are going through. And they're probably like, what the hell is he talking about, you know? Anyways, I was able to get myself onto the hospital bed without any assistance, and all the while my hands were still, I almost want to call it into a decorticate position, where I might get this backward. It's either decerebrate or decorticate position, where my body was basically straight like this, okay? My fingers were in maximum extension. They were like, I can't do it right now, but it was basically, my fingers were going back, and my finger, stupid camera, my finger was in hyperflex position. It was like this, okay? And I couldn't move it, it was locked up. And I probably went under what's called tetany, where basically I have an electrolyte imbalance in my body where my muscles are just causing spasms, right? It could have been from dehydration, it could have been from just whatever it is that I was doing. And all the while, I'm just still trying to process all of these things. They're asking me questions now. They're like, you know, can you tell me your name? Brian, where do you live? Bellevue. And I tried my best so hard to answer as fast as I can because I know that they are testing me, right? Because this is the stuff that I do when I'm testing people, like, tell me your date, tell me who's our current president, do you know where you are, stuff like that. And they started asking me all of these different questions, like, have you ever had anxiety before? And I have said yes. And, what usually with anxiety comes the next dreaded questions. Have you ever thought about suicide? Have you ever thought about killing yourself? And I did tell them, I have had those moments, but I'm like, who technically hasn't had that thought of like, not to say that I want to die. I'm like, I feel like dying. It's more like, I wonder what it's like to die. Right? What would happen if I was just not alive? Like, I have those types of questions, okay? I'm not gonna lie. So, and I just want to actually go back to the story. Sorry, I'm backtracking a little bit because I'm trying to just to get everything organized. The feeling that I had when I was in my room was I experienced all of my deepest fears actually, which is actually which is why the anxiety attack just kicked in. And one of my biggest fears is dying. Like, I know a lot of us are afraid of dying, right? The other biggest fear was just the fact that I realized from that moment on at 12:10 in the morning, if something really were to happen to me, if I did have a stroke and I did have a heart attack, I have nobody that I could call on to really check up on me. And that really took me over the edge as far as why I was having that anxiety exacerbated even more, because I realized it's 12:10. I don't have a girlfriend, I don't have a wife, I don't have whatever, no kids. No one would know what would have happened to me if shit hit the fan, right? I couldn't call anybody because, let's face it, everyone was sleeping, and not to blame anybody's fault, but that's the fear that I had. It was the fact that, oh my God, I'm gonna die, and oh my God, I'm gonna die alone. And so that's not the best way to go, actually. I would say dying alone is probably the worst way to go. Anyways. So they started giving me Ativan in the hospital, and it has helped calm me down. And at some point, my boss did show up. And it was good to see her, to be honest. It was like to see a familiar face. And I'm happy, like, Natalie, that you showed up, because it really made me feel good, And it just felt like someone, because the way I see her, she's like a very motherly figure to me. I don't know what it is, but she just reminds me of a very motherly type of person. And so she shows up, and the first thing she did was just gave me a hug. And just told me that everything was going to be okay. And from there, I felt comfortable. I felt comforted. I felt like, what? Things are going to be okay, right? You've given me my Ativan. You've given me my IV. At this point, my hands have started to relax a little bit. I could kind of start thinking clearly again, like of just like more clearly than I was. And it's hard because when I've never been a patient in the American health system before, I've never actually, we've all gone to doctor's visits, but I've never actually utilized any of these services before, of going into an ambulance, and then people are just checking up on you and just doing the things that they're supposed to do to try to make sure that you're okay. And one of the scariest, or not scariest, but one of the things that I started having issues with is that I started feeling like people were looking at me a certain way. And what I mean by that is that look where it's like, what the hell is going on with this guy? This guy is probably some psycho, like, you know what I mean? Like, we've all seen that, right? When, let's say we're walking at the park, we have, let's face it, a homeless guy just shouting in the air, just screaming nonsense. And we try our best to just stay away from that person, because it's not the norm, right? It's just, this is not who we associate ourselves with. This guy's crazy. We don't know what he's talking about. And that's kind of what I felt like I was being seen as. Like this guy, this little kid, or not kid anymore, but who is just having a bad trip, let's put it that way, or just having a really bad anxiety attack. And I just felt like I was being looked down upon, because I told him, like, the reason why this triggered is because I just felt like, with COVID, it's hard to not live life the way you want to live, especially when your life requires me hanging out with other people, doing certain things, and just, life, right? I know I've talked about this before in my other videos where for me, life is about playing basketball with friends. It's about hanging out with your friends. It's just about spending time with those who are close around you. But obviously with COVID, we can't do that because we don't want to put ourselves or other people at risk of this freaking pandemic and I feel that we just don't really have a good sense of control of in this country. And that's the other thing. It's like, I started feeling like I had no sense of control anymore last night. And when you start giving away your control, and that's when you start feeling like, oh my God, like you just start reaching out for anything and everything. You're grasping straws just to get some sense of control back into your life. And there's not much else to say other than the fact that I did learn some of the things that really did scare me still. And one thing that I do know for a fact is that I am not ready to die, as weird as that sounds, because I've had these conversations before with my friend where it's like, if I had cancer, like would I really treat it or would I just let life just take its course, right? But experiencing what I experienced yesterday where I felt like, at any moment my heart would just give out because it just exploded, right? Stupid. And that I'm gonna die. I was afraid that I was gonna die and I did not want that to happen. And so anyways, I just kind of want to share my story today of just what it was like experiencing this anxiety for people who don't know what an anxious person is going to go through. And again, I am not by any nature an anxious guy. Like again, I'm super calm, I'm super mellow, but sometimes, even the strongest people that we know in our lives end up needing help as well. Like I'm always trying to create this strong machismo, like I'm tough, I can handle my emotions. I could, I'm not weak, right? Because weak people collapse. Weak people need help from other people. And I'm trying my best not to do that. But suffice to say, it did happen yesterday and I just fell. And, honestly, what really, really helped make me feel better as well is I just let out all of my emotions. I just started crying. I just started like bawling. Like, I'm just like, like the hard cry, like, and it felt good. Like even now, like I want to cry, but like at the same time I'm holding back because you're not supposed to cry, right? Men don't cry. And I just want to say again, just if you have friends who are going through a tough time, if they're by themselves, like you guys, feel free to reach out to them, especially now with the pandemic going on because it's not easy, right? I know a lot of people are saying, we're starting to normalize life, but let's face it, this is not normalizing life. This is just normalizing this current predicament. But in reality, I don't think any of us would be very happy to live a life like this for the next 5 years, 10 years down the line, because it's just, we're social creatures. We're not meant to be in isolation. We're not meant to just live life on our own. We're supposed to be social gatherers, right? Hunter-gatherers and just do things. And so, yeah, I just want to say thank you to all of the people who were there to just really cheer me up yesterday, especially you, Natalie, my boss. I mean, that's the reason why I did not leave the job for another job is because, it's the people you work with that provides the best work environment for you. Just, anyways, I'm rambling. It's been 23 minutes since I've last talked and yeah, COVID is just really screwing me. So anyways, thanks for listening, guys. And if you know anybody, again, who's dealing with some anxiety, just have a heart, have some compassion, and just let them know that they're not alone. That you're not alone. We're all going through this together, right? We're all struggling and trying our best to go through this together. All right, take care.